Welcome to the 24 Authors Panel.
Keith is one of our super fans. He's been on our super fan roundtable. He is a collector of 24 memorabilia and an all-around great guy. He's got a podcast called Inside the Bunker, and you're just going to have a blast. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Keith to introduce our esteemed panelists. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. I'm here to dive into another part of the 24 universe, the literary part of the 24 universe. A lot of people, are interested in the other corners of the 24 universe. So I want to start by introducing our guest today for the panel. We have Stephen Keslowitz, author of The Tao of Jack Bauer and various other nonfiction novels, such as Why You Better Call Saul and The World According to The Simpsons, that really analyze the source material and gives extensive studies on the characters and themes within. Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Absolutely. We also have New York Times bestselling author Tara Bennett. Hi, Tara.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for coming. Author of the official 24 companion books for seasons 1 through 6 and various other TV movie companion books, including Outlander, Sons of Anarchy, and Lost. She also co-wrote and released The Story of Marvel Studios, The Making of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with her husband, Paul, this past month. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
No problem. We have New York Times bestselling author Dayton Ward with us. He was the author of 24 Trial by Fire, which is set in 1994 and is a prequel to season 1 when Jack Bauer was working for the CIA before he started at CTU. He also is the author of numerous Star Trek tie-in novels, including Star Trek Coda Book 1 Moments Asunder, which just launched this past September. Thank you for joining us, Dayton.
No, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we also, last but not least, for now, if James joins us, as you were saying, late, we'll get to him. But we have New York Times bestselling author David Mack, author of 24 Rogue, which he won the Scribe Award for Best Original Novel in 2015. 24 Rogue is set between seasons 8 and Live Another Day and explains some of Jack Bauer's exploits dealing with international arms dealer Carl Rask. He also is the author of numerous Star Trek tie-in novels, including Star Wars Coda Book 3, Oblivion's Gate, which is the finale of the Coda trilogy launching on November 30th. So thank you so much, David, for joining us.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. So my questions, I'm going to start off with individual questions, and then we'll just kind of go from there to some group questions. So I'll start with you, David. With 24 Rogue, you told a story that took place 1 year, 7 months, and 23 days after the events of season 8, as stated at the beginning of the book, which was very specific, by the way. Whoa.
Well, the show is very specific.
Absolutely. How did you use the time jump to get inside Jack Bauer's head as a character and everything he had been through, especially the last 6 or so hours of day 8?
Well, the last several hours of day 8 were dealt with by James Swallow in his book Deadline. He covered he picked up right from the last moment of day 8 and covered Jack having 24 hours to get out of the country. So I figured James had covered that. What I was covering was the mindset of Jack after an extended period of time in exile, acting as a free agent, basically a ghost, a renegade, someone with no support, he's got no resources. He can't just call in CTU. He can't just can't get a floor plan sent to his phone anymore. He's on his own, really on his own for the first time in ages. And so I was sort of playing from the point of view of a man who has learned to hide his identity, to not trust anybody. But even though he has been exiled, even though he's being treated as a fugitive by the United States, he is still a patriot. Much like Batman in Dark Knight, he's saying, if this is what my country needs me to be, for the sake of my country, this is what I will be. But I'm still going to do good while I'm out here. I'm still going to track down people who hurt people for a living, people who traffic weapons, people who traffic other people, and I'm going to shut them down any way I can. So he is still doing what he does, even though he's all alone, because he is a man who believes in doing right and not just hiding.
Right, and going through the novel, for those that have not read them, I picked them up. I mean, they're great novels, and it expands on the 24 universe. And what was the collaboration process between you and the creative team of 24? Was there any collaboration?
Not really. Most of what I was dealing with was the licensing office at Fox. They set certain parameters. They told me the time frame in which they wanted me to work. They told me the few things that were off limits, in order to remain consistent with the style of the show. Certain types of profanity are allowed, others are not. The one rule they had that was hard and fast was no blasphemy. Apparently that's a big deal at Fox. But beyond that, they pretty much gave me free reign. They said, develop a story that feels like 24. So I have a book with 24 chapters. Each chapter represents 1 hour of story time. I follow the 24 model. You've got 6 episodes of setup. You have 12 episodes of complication with a good midpoint reversal.
Right.
And then your last 6 episodes usually tell another related but also self-contained story as your climax. So you've got your opening story, your middle story, and your end story. So it's structured like a season of 24.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dayton, your book, 24 Trial by Fire, is on the total other end of the spectrum by taking place when Jack is in his mid to late 20s, which has never been seen before. What process did you go through in molding a young Jack Bauer?
Well, that wasn't the plan. The original plan was I was going to follow Jim Swallow and Dave with a third book set between season 8 and Live Another Day. And that's the outline I submitted to Fox. They love the outline, but somebody somewhere in that chain of approvals decided a prequel would really be cool at this point in time. So they gave me the parameters. They had envisioned in their head Jack Bauer as River Phoenix's version of Indiana Jones. So completely raw and new. And so I pushed back gently, and I was reminding them, he was an LAPD cop. He was a special forces guy. He has experience even before CTU. So that comparison doesn't quite work. So we settled on the idea that he would be a young CIA agent on his first field assignment under the tutelage of a more experienced agent. And of course, things go completely wrong, as they always do on 24.
As always.
So I basically, the story that I submitted was going to be set on Okinawa as part of the continuing, between season 8 and Live Another Day. So I kept all of that, but by setting it in the 90s, it actually benefited me greatly because I was stationed on Okinawa in the late 80s. So I was able to draw more on memories of the area, the military bases and the surrounding towns and the people there. So that actually helped out quite a bit.
Awesome. Tara, hi. You spent a good amount of time documenting and really telling some great behind-the-scenes stories during the filming of 24 through the first 6 seasons, companion novels, as well as the 24 official magazine. What was your experience working behind the scenes of 24 and being able to document those interviews and stories?
Yeah, well, these books were my very first solo books. So they're really, really special to me because of that. And then also I couldn't have had a better show and a better family of people. I mean, I was watching a little bit of the segment before and it was like, oh my gosh, it's like a visual yearbook. These people that I spent a lot of time with, because it was a really generous set in that I came in about season 5. And so I spent a lot of time in the Western White House set, and I, was able to go to a lot of locations with the team and see how they worked and build relationships, that I still have to this day with a lot of the people that work below the line and the cast. And it was the most I've ever been to a television show set. I would go to Chatsworth a lot to be able to document the seasons. And it was really just wonderful. It was, they were this own little microcosm studio set. It was an old warehouse that they had turned into writers' rooms and the standing stages out in Chatsworth. So, I'd come in to town, drive out in my little rental car to this weird little space that, was an outlier all to its own and its own 24 ecosystem, set up in the publicist's office, and then just run around for days talking to people. I do up to sometimes, 40 interviews in 2 days with everybody over there, and then, head out and go do a set visit, for maybe the finale of a season, or, I remember we went to the old LA Times printing warehouse, which was a huge set piece for, I think it was season 6, where you just, you never know where you were going and you always had a great adventure. And I really got to see the nitty gritty of how that operation worked, the friendships, what that, imbued into the story and to the what we all loved about the show was watching, the characters that managed to live, be around for a long time, and watching Kiefer's journey. And so, there is no better way for me as a solo writer, writing books and companion books, to really have the best experience with that group of people, from John Cassar, who, often had me on his sets, to everybody in all the department heads, to the actors who were really ingratiating and spending time with me. I remember Carlo Rota plopped me onto a dolly once as we were waiting and just rolled me around the set. And it's just like, they were so sweet and so kind. And I was, I was a producer of television, so I knew what they did. It wasn't like I was, learning, but I was really ingratiated into a culture that you can see. When you see everybody having, in the prior segments and the ones that'll happen later on today, they love each other. They still do. They've all gone off to do other things, but it was really wonderful to get a really insider's view of why the show was so great on the inside and the outside.
That's awesome, and those are some awesome stories. So Stephen, let's see. Sorry, my notes went away. Stephen, you're not. And thank you, James, for joining us. We will be in 1 second. We got the time right this time. So your novel, The Tao of Jack Bauer, is really a character study on the character of Jack Bauer and the world of 24. The tagline on the cover is, "What our favorite terrorist buster says with no lunch break." What about 24 made you to choose to write a novel about it?
Yeah, so the book is really it's more of a nonfiction, really analyzing the issues that the show addresses. So I wrote this during law school, so I'm an attorney now. And, this is the first post 9/11, drama dealing with issues like terrorism and torture. And I think it's just a critical show for, understanding those issues and visualizing torture, right? Before 24, you'd read about torture in a book, but seeing Jack Bauer torture someone, or seeing Jack Bauer get tortured, and then of course all of the ethical, moral, legal dilemmas that the characters find themselves in. It's just a fascinating show. There's so much to dissect, and that's really what I tried to do with the book. And also just to discuss Jack Bauer's philosophy. The Tao of Jack Bauer. There's so many sort of themes, but think of the state of exception, right, where the idea is Jack is operating under, extraordinary circumstances, but it keeps happening, right? So is that a lesson for, how to deal with terrorism, which is an ongoing problem? If you make an exception one time, does it become the rule? And I think as you dig deeper into these issues, the ticking time bomb scenario, people might say we're totally against torture in all circumstances. I think watching a show like 24, it forces you to sort of question that, because if somebody is in Times Square, you got the terrorist, he's sitting in a chair and, says, I have the bomb and I'm not telling you where, do you torture that person? That may not be an easy answer, so it's a political show. I think it's a very carefully put together show and very thoughtful, and there's a lot to learn from it.
Yeah, I think that's the cusp of the show, is being able to, do you take out one person to save 100, and that's a great, I just finished your novel and it's fantastic. So,
thank you.
But it's great. Okay. So we have James. Thanks for joining us today from the UK. So we have award-winning New York Times, Sunday Times, and Amazon #1 best-selling author James Swallow, author of 24 Deadline, which takes place immediately following season 8 and answers the question of what happened to Jack Bauer after the final moments of that season. He also is the author of numerous tie-in novels for various IPs, including Warhammer 40K, Deus Ex, and Star Trek. There's a theme here. Which the newest tie-in novel, Star Trek Coda, Book 2, The Ashes of Tomorrow, just released last month. Thank you for joining us, James.
It's good to be here. Thank you very much. I think I'm lucky that I've been able to write a lot of badasses in my career, of which Jack is obviously at the top of that list.
Awesome. And talking about Deadline, there's that untold story between, season 8 and Live Another Day. What made you think of that story? Was it something that came to you, or was it that Fox come to you and say, hey, we want to tell this story? Or was it something you came up with? Tell us the process on that.
Oh, it was, they said, we want to do that story. We want to kind of facilitate the narrative to kind of go from the end of that final season. Remember that last shot of kind of Jack looking up into the screen, and we see it's like the drone shot of him, and then everything goes black, and then that's like, where does he go from there? And then the next time we see him is when we pick up in Live Another Day, and there's a lot of time has passed. So the last time we see him before Live Another Day is he's stuck in New York City. How does he get out of there? And that was the story they wanted me to write. Is that, how does Jack get away? How does he shrug off all of this? So my novel literally picks up 1 hour later. And of course, Jack doesn't have one bad day. He has a lot of bad days. And this is just another example of his bad day just continuing on. And the story is essentially what he wants to do is he wants to keep the promise he made to his daughter, which is to say goodbye to her before he drops off the face of the earth. And he travels across the US to do that incognito, but he's being chased by an FBI team in the wake of all the events that we saw in the previous season. There's a Russian team of hit guys who are coming after him as well. And he ends up in a small town in the middle of nowhere, and he runs afoul of a bunch of bikers who are also into their own kind of situation. Jack, as always, wherever he goes, trouble finds him, or, he's a trouble magnet, right? So all of these different situations all come together, and it's all about Jack just trying to get through it. His whole motivation throughout this story is just leave me alone, let me do what I need to do, and you'll never see me again. But that never happens. And so, bad guys find him, and Jack deals out, Jack justice.
As always. You also have several fan favorite characters make an appearance, such as Chase, Mandy, and even Nina, which, if you want to find out how that's even possible, you have to read the book. So what was your creative process in exploring the expanded 24 universe and telling such a captivating tale?
Chase, I loved as a character, and he kind of gets put on a bus at the, when we don't see him anymore. And it's like, what happened to him? How did his life pay out? And there was also the element of the story of, nobody ever referred to the fact that a nuclear bomb went off in US soil, after that one season that happened. And I thought, I'm sure people would remember that. So I wanted to do something to play around with that. And I'd read about this idea of people who during 9/11 were using the opportunity to kind of declare themselves dead and, and disappear into the wilderness. And I thought, there's an opportunity for Chase to kind of find himself a new life after this nuclear device goes off. He reinvents himself. But Jack's situation in the course of Deadline is he needs somebody he can trust, someone who he can rely on, and that person is Chase. So he decides to disrupt this very nice, quiet life that Chase has made for himself because he needs someone to help him get through this situation. So that's how these two characters connect. And the team at Fox were very nice to allow me to bring this character back and also put Chase through the ringer as well, which was a lot of fun. As for the other characters, Mandy, I've always had a lot of love for Mandy, mostly because that's my wife's name. And, I don't think she's a serial killing evil assassin. Sitting right across from me right now. I have to be really careful what I say. But I like the idea of that character. She's such a chameleon. And so the opportunity for me to just kind of drop her into the story was a lot of fun. And Nina, I think Nina is one of our favorite 24 villains, right? And even though, she's dead and gone, I wanted to bring her back in a way. So she's kind of in the story in flashback. She's almost like she's the devil on Jack Bauer's shoulder. So it was a lot of fun to kind of take the voices of characters that I liked and put them into the story.
Awesome. And you did a great job of that.
Thank you.
This question's for all of you. Why do you think that 24 has been such an internationally popular series? We have 18 different countries, represented today watching us through this convention. What do you think has made it such a lasting impact on the entire world? And any of you
every episode is a masterclass in how to write a thriller. There's that. I mean, the pacing is incredible. It almost redefined the pacing of thrillers on television in an era, in a medium that had been dominated by, let's say, the detective story, which had these sort of slow passages. It showed you can do an investigative series with a much higher degree of maintained tension and ending not only every act, but every episode on a cliffhanger and propelling it forward in that manner. It was, sort of hearkening back to the serials of the 40s, but in this sort of new, more streamlined, more action-packed format. And I think it's just addictive. It's addictive television.
I'll add, when I was writing the first companion novel, there was another author who was from Japan that was writing. We shared some of the interviews, but it was huge in Japan. And I think, Kiefer just felt like almost like a superhero to the Japanese culture and his performance. And, when we talked about why it was so popular there, she just, said that it was the thriller aspect of it. I think there was something really translatable across cultures. The world was in a place where I think you kind of wanted a grounded superhero. And at that time, Jack Bauer really filled that, kind of brief that people were looking for.
Yeah, I would also add it. The themes are universal, building on what you just said, and I think also it's a show that rewards critical thinking. Thinking about issues, and also the way that the show is structured. Not just the 24 hours one day, but also just the multiple threads, the multiple themes. So as much as it's addictive, it's also, once you watch it, you may want to watch that again or go back to a previous season because there's so much going on. It's, there's a book that's called Why Everything Bad is Good for You. And, 24 is a perfect example of that. People think that television isn't good for your brain. I think a show like 24 actually challenges that because there's just so much to keep in your mind, and that's actually good for you, believe it or not. So I think there's that element also.
I think beyond the show itself, I think it kind of ushered in an evolution in how we watch television.
Yes.
I think 24, the first season, was probably the first time I bought a television series, and it's, a complete season of television on disc. And we would binge season 1 before season 2's premiere. And then we would do that every year. And then all of a sudden we've got shows on Netflix and other streaming platforms that dump their entire seasons on one day. I argue that 24, if they didn't start it, it certainly pushed it in that direction. Just the way we watch the shows. My wife would stop watching the show week to week and wait till there were 4 or 6 of them in the DVR, and then we would go through. So not me. I would watch every week because that's.
I agree. I think binge television was created by 24. I wholeheartedly
do believe it.
Yes. Yeah.
It's quantifiable. Dayton, you're 100% right with that. Just in that season 1 of 24 wasn't widely watched. It was the summer between season 1 and season 2 when everyone bought the box set because they heard so much about this is a great show, you've got to watch it. And then season 2, it blew up. So it was really a sea change in terms of the canary in the coal mine for binge watching television.
There you go.
And just to jump in, we found out through our interviews with different members of the cast is that was a decision that was made. It was going to wait until Christmas, but somebody at Fox backed it up and said, no, let's release the DVDs in the summer. And the rest is history, really. Yeah.
And I don't know if this is quantifiable, but I mean, there were other shows being released on DVD at that time, but I'm pretty sure 24 was the first time an entire season was dropped, at least, and definitely positioned the way it was so that it would prime the pump for the next season. And I mean, that became appointment television in the fall. Every summer or late summer, that new season set would drop, and we'd all grab it, and then waiting for the new season to hit, broadcast. So yeah. Into my veins, right into my eyeballs and into my veins.
That's the way to do it, man. That's the way to do it. Did you want to add anything on that, James?
Oh, yeah, I'd say, I think everything everybody said there, I absolutely agree with all of that. I think 24 changed the conversation about what television was, changed the structure of it. But in terms of to touch back on your question about what's the international appeal, I think everybody gets the idea of the lone man against the world, right? Everybody gets that idea of the guy who's just in the vice and it's being turned tighter and tighter and tighter. I think that Jack Bauer as a character has kind of crystallized an archetype of villains, of hero characters in these stories. I like to talk about what I call my JB theory, right? Which is, I think, is action heroes tend to fall into one of 3 categories: Jack Bauer, Jason Bourne, or James Bond. Mm-hmm. And the James Bond guy is the suave one. The Jason Bourne guy is the kind of cool, analytical one. But the Jack Bauer guy is the sort of in your face, kicking down the door, banging the guy's head on the table until he tells you where the bomb is. And to have a character like that that's become such an archetype, that transcends national boundaries. That becomes, it becomes a thing that's just taken on a life of its own.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you obviously are all 24 fans, I would hope.
Yeah.
Do you all have a favorite 24 moment, a moment where you were like, this is the moment that this show is forever engraved in my mind?
Oh, good Lord. Just one.
Or two, or three.
I'm only going to, I'm going to pick one of several because I realize that we have an esteemed member overseeing these proceedings. When President Logan is in his limo on day 8 and Bauer has the Iron Bauer suit.
Yeah.
And he's pointing at the windshield and he's like, that's Jack Bauer. That's one of my favorite scenes just because the two guys are looking at each other through that windshield and you just know, okay, it's a day of reckoning right here. It's about to be a bad day. It's a great scene.
I think.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your part in
That's
that.
quite all right.
I would have to say just one line of dialogue. I'm going to need a hacksaw.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, for me, it was the ethical dilemmas. I wrote about this in the book, where Jack forces the doctor to operate on the terrorist instead of Paul Raines. Just how that scene was built up, right? Jack stole the wife and all that stuff, and then the fact that he's seeking to save a terrorist's life so he can then get information from him. I thought that was just incredible. So that actually has stuck with me. I think it's the best scene in television history, frankly.
It is.
I'm going to just jump in as well as, and this is not pandering to Greg whatsoever. It is. I was there for season 5. I was season 5 present quite a bit, and the work that Greg and Gene Smart did together. There are too many wonderful moments in season 5 that went into season 6, but I have to say season 5 for me felt like the season that the AB stories were you were happy to bounce back and forth from Jack's story to the president's story and his wife, and it was just so well balanced, and their work together was absolutely stellar. And any scene between the two of them when he was either at his squirreliest trying to get out of a situation, or when the two of them were with each other, I adored all of their moments.
I agree, Tara, and I will say, with Logan's storyline specifically, I hated him in season 4. No offense, Greg, but loved him in season 5. Gene Smart. I mean, it just literally, I actually look forward more to their scenes than actually Jack Bauer's storyline at certain points, and that's a testament to, I mean, just the on-screen chemistry and how you guys did it. But
she was such an amazing joy to work with. What can I say? She's gone on to wonderful things, but she was fantastic in 24.
What about you, James? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I missed the question.
You said I have a hat, so I meant David. I'm sorry.
It has been so long since I watched the show, I can't really pull a specific moment out, which of course is my cue for, well, that clearly it's time to do a rewatch on Hulu. So
Absolutely. What about a favorite character? I know in Steven's book, you actually, at the very beginning of the book, you do, in memory of Edgar Stiles, our favorite techie, we hardly knew you. So obviously your favorite character is Edgar Stiles, but elaborate on that. Do you have like a favorite character that you just like gravitated to?
Edgar was great. I think as just the fan favorite, sure. I mean, I think I would probably choose Jack Bauer, and frankly, I mean, President Logan was such, what everybody just said. Those scenes, the chemistry. I'm just repeating what everybody else said, but excellent. I would say Jack and Charles Logan and their scenes together as well. Just excellent. And again, it's juxtaposing different sort of themes together. The political, and then the more militaristic. And I think the show did such a great job combining all of that. So you had these separate types of threads, and then when they came together, I think that's again something that just made the show so special. The writers always figured out a way to connect those different parts in a very satisfying way.
Anybody else?
Chloe, for me, after Jack, I think Chloe's definitely the character that I've got the most love for. She's so long suffering, but also we see, like, I think as well as Jack, we see her as the character who has the most growth throughout the series.
I just dovetail off of that because I think that for a show that had this kind of masculine energy a lot of the time, to be able to add a character actor like Mary Lynn and to let Chloe be Chloe throughout the entire arc of that show. There was, certainly moments when they put her out in the field and she had her mini Jack Bauer moments, but Chloe was very much who she was. She was able to be quirky and odd, and Mary Lynn's innate sense of comedic timing really added a little bit of those pressure point, with like the balloon letting go sometimes, where you just needed her, and she became such an MVP in that, in a character standpoint and an actor standpoint, that Chloe could have been reduced or reductive or been turned into something else, but to have Chloe be Chloe through the entire arc of the show's iterations, I think was something really special, and that they all really appreciated and understood, and let her be what she needed to be.
Absolutely. For writing for Star Trek and 24, so Dayton, James, and David, they're vastly different genres. Are there similarities in writing for both universes?
All right, guys.
You want to go first, Dayton?
I was going to say I'm rock, paper, scissoring. The similarities probably are external to the storytelling. It's mostly the fact that you interact with licensing representatives for the different properties, who have a degree of guardianship over the property. And sometimes you have to navigate wickets of that protection, because they don't want you out there embarrassing their brand. You outsider, you interloper.
Right.
That being said, my interactions with Fox Licensing was always very positive and very collaborative. They were happy to have the first outline. They were enthusiastic about the idea of a prequel that they of course submitted the idea to me, but they liked the direction I took it. It's very similar with how we work with CBS Consumer Products and the Star Trek novels. That's a very invested group of people that are very knowledgeable about the property. I found it to be a very similar experience working on 24.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that the two franchises, in terms of writing tie-in novels, they present the same kinds of challenges. In both cases, you've got a franchise with a lot of complicated, interconnected continuity, very large casts of characters that you have to keep track of, who's alive, who's dead, who knows who's never met who. You've got a very complicated timeline in both cases. And the chief challenge in both franchises when you're writing a tie-in novel is tone. The tone is very different. There is a particular sort of hopeful utopia under stress tone to Star Trek. And then there is the very gritty, real world, there are no good guys, there are no bad guys, there are just people in struggle, and there are morally gray choices, and we've got to make the right one, and we've got no time to make the decision. So it's all a matter of tone and timing, but I think in terms of writing a good tie-in novel for either one, the same mechanics apply. You've got to have a good, strong central plot, you've got to have good pacing, you've got to find the characters' voices. Jack talks a certain way. So you've got to sort of hear Jack in your head when you're writing Jack's dialogue, the same way you would with Kirk or Picard. They're going to structure their sentences differently. They're going to respond differently to threats. So, I mean, it's a matter of getting in the character's head and finding the voice.
Yeah, I'd agree completely there with what Dave and Dayton said. It's about finding there's an essential texture to every fictional world, and each one has its own texture and flavor. Star Trek is one brand, 24 is another, and you have to steep yourself in that. I think you need to be a fan, at least to some degree, to understand that world, to understand those characters. Like Dave said, hear their voice in your head, and then replicate that on the page. If you don't get it, it's going to just be obvious, because the people who consume tie-in stories are people who are dedicated fans who want to expand out that world. Those are the people who love that show. They know those characters inside and out. And if you don't get it, if you don't get the voice right, they're going to know about it, and they're not going to want to read your book. So it behooves all of us to make sure that we do this exactly right, that we get that texture correct. We steep ourselves in those characters. If we're not fans of it, we become fans of it. I mean, we're lucky that, the three of us have all been watching 24 since season 1. So we knew these characters.
Since
We knew
hour
this-
one.
You know, yeah, exactly, from hour 1, right? And so when the opportunity came down to do this trilogy, we all leapt at it because it was like, oh, absolutely, 24, yeah, you know, sign me up, because we knew these characters and we loved writing them, and you know, and having the opportunity to get into the 24 world, to tell a story, give back a little bit to something that gave us so much pleasure, was fantastic.
You know, I might have hoped, and I think if anybody can make it happen, it's all of you, Jack Bauer and Captain Kirk. I think the two of them on a planet.
You know, I once did a
However you make it
mashup
work.
graphic of Kiefer Sutherland in the uniform, and he looks surprisingly like young Shatner. I think if they were to do a new Star Trek series, you could just bring in Kiefer, and he could just take over as Kirk.
I would read it. I would absolutely read it. Absolutely. And if anybody can make it happen, you're here at the table.
That's
Just
awesome.
saying.
We'll see what we can do. I'll make a call. I know
Tara.
a guy. I know a guy who knows a guy.
So it's for Tara. You just released the Marvel Studios, you know, the making of the Marvel Studios in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What, it's kind of the same question, but with Marvel, what was it like working with Marvel and 24? Those are personally two of my favorite properties, 24 and Marvel. Love them. So, of course, I have the book ordered. It's coming in, you know, next week. So, but what was it like working behind the scenes of both? Is there any similarities to the way they're structured, or?
Well, one, thank you very much for the purchase. Deeply appreciated. Yeah, you know, here I would definitely say Paul, my husband and co-writer of the Marvel Cinematic Universe book, we both said that everything that we'd done in our career prior to that book was preparation for that book. So 24 definitely was very important in terms of organization, comportment of myself amongst professionals on set, making relationships, understanding the language of making these kinds of stories, so that when I ask questions, they're informed and that there's an understanding of all the departments. And I mean, I definitely, you know, I was thinking about what I really got being on the set so often with 24, which was really wonderful, was that it was an immersion into the working process of you know, everyone from Rodney Charters to the stunt guys to Sterling Rush and the props. You know, they really spent a lot of time with me to let me watch what they did, and that you know, imbued in me not just a functional producer experience, which I had, you know, coming out of radio, television, and film degree, but it also then gave me a lot of observation time, because I really got to know how everybody did what they did, and, you know, watched the elements, you know, was, you know, maybe looking at blueprints for, you know, standing sets for 24, and then, you know, having conversations with the special effect gag guys and seeing them prepping stuff, and, you know, looking at how the show shot when it was on a standing set in the Chatsworth warehouses, then versus when they went out into the field. What did that look like? And, you know, that was really exceptionally helpful for me to then, as I moved on from property to property, to be able to get the trust of those people I was talking to, that they knew that I knew what they were doing and what they do, how they do it. And when I asked questions, it wasn't these kind of like too broad, you know, to so broad that, like, I don't know, I can answer that in 10 ways. I was able to be really surgical about, like, why did you make this choice for this episode? And why did you do this, you know, to if it was setting up what Jack was going to be doing, you know, they used to obviously write the seasons as sets of 3 in the 24 episodes so that they could kind of do these pods to move the stories along. So having a lot of those conversations about storytelling and broad storytelling over a long period of time. And, you know, hey, that's what the MCU is. It's 23 movies in phases 1 through 3, which is what our book incorporates in the building of that universe, in the micro choices about things that go wrong, things that go right. And, you know, I can absolutely say that my years of time with the team at 24 also getting feedback from the fans, in which, the fiction writers of this, they'll tell you really quick in these books, you're not covering what I want you to cover in a companion book. And, it's really leaning into and hearing what a fandom is going to want to know about the things that you're writing about. And that's always been extremely important to me. And, in Titan Books, who I wrote this with, in terms of them being the publisher, let me have a lot of leeway in terms of crafting what the books would be like, especially as they moved forward. And that's helped me craft what a companion book to this day is when I'm going to put something out, what makes it worthwhile. Why would I bother spending money on a companion book when, obviously, especially in the lifetime of 24 and since then, I can watch a ton of great DVD featurettes, or I can look at all the many outlets out there that are covering a show ad nauseum. Why do I plunk down whatever amount of money it is for this book? And I'm always thinking, going all the way back to these books, how do I try to make something that feels special, that feels like it's maybe covering the subject in a different way, and that's making it worthwhile for you to have it on your bookshelf?
Absolutely.
I like to display them for people when they come to visit, so they can see that I'm well versed. My coffee table books, I want people to think that I'm halfway intelligent. Sometimes, not very often. But yeah, I love displaying my 24 books wherever I can.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I got one last quick question. If ever asked to write or document more stories in the 24 universe, how quick would you guys be to sign on the dotted line?
Already making the motion with my hand.
You hear that? So whoever's watching, wants to, let them know. So I want to thank all of you for documenting and telling great stories in the 24 universe. If you're interested in any of the books we spoke about today, they're available at your local bookstore, Amazon, wherever you get your books. Stephen, Tara, Dayton, David, James, thank you so much for joining us today and celebrating 20 years of 24. So.
I was going to ask John if he has any questions.
Oh, yeah. I just saw him join.
Yeah.
Hi, John.
Yeah, sorry, guys. Somewhere today I had to go to the washroom and eat something. So. I'm loving this whole thing. This is just so much fun. I think we should do it like every weekend.
I'm in.
You guys are great. And thank you, all of you, because it's with your support, I think that the show became as big as it did right from the very beginning. And the fact that you guys love the show as much as we love making it made a big difference. And being able to tell the fans all about it like that is great.
Well, just a thank you to John, because I was on most of your episodes whenever I did set visits, all the way to season finales, which, technically most times they would not allow anybody. Come
you're the only one that got the secret red script.
Yeah, and that meant the world to me, and it meant the world to me being able to make the books as good as they could be, because that kind of access is unprecedented, and to feel like I was always welcomed onto your set and welcomed into the family was so deeply appreciated and made the books better. So thank you, John.
You guys, and again, thanks again to all of you. Thanks for.
Well, Tara, how did you keep those secrets? Just
Man.
curious. You can trust you with anything.
Listen, my whole life is an NDA, but I will definitely say that 24 was, one of the shows that I had to keep secrets for. I knew the ending from 24. I went to knowing the end of Lost before anybody knew that. And then I was on set for Tony Stark's funeral for Endgame. So,
wow. Wait, Lost is over?
I know.
Yeah. What?
So I always laugh and just say, listen, the gig's more important than someone else knowing a secret, and that's why I'm still doing what I'm doing. So,
hey, when Tara was a guest on the podcast, we were talking about everything and covered a whole bunch of stuff. And at the end, I said, well, what, do you have anything else coming out? And she said, oh, yeah, this Marvel book. And she showed me the 2-volume set of the Marvel book.
It's just Marvel.
It's just that.
Just that.
That was awesome.
You got to start from somewhere, and 24 was my start. So, I will always have such a special place for it because of that, but then also because I love that set and everybody on it. And then, it just helped me have a career that I never expected, but I'm so deeply grateful for.